I thank you all for joining here. My name is Takaya Blaney. My ancestral name is Chikajimuch. I am from the Tla'amin Nation, and I'm standing here with my two Jaja, my relatives, my cousins, delivering a message from the young people of our territories regarding the future of our waterways. It was incredibly important for me to come here and to deliver this message, because if we do not do everything in our generation to restore our river, we lose our identity as salmon peoples and we face the extinction of wild salmon in our territories. I'm here because the industrial occupation of my ancestral river has obstructed my birthright. As a Tla'amin Kaimuch, representing the upcoming generation of our people, my waters and lands form the basis of my belonging. My waters and lands are an inheritance from my ancestors who endured genocide from the forces represented by this Canadian flag because their existence obstructed colonialism and resource extraction. My ancestors intended for my waters and lands to feed me and the countless future generations beyond me, but instead they are being consumed by extractive economies rooted in colonialism and capitalism. The industrial desecration of my homelands by logging, mining, hydroelectric dams robs me of my birthright. I refuse to accept what is unacceptable. For so long, our people have been made to endure, to assimilate. But we know that the only answer for us as a people in regards to climate resiliency or protecting biodiversity is in our lands. We have the answers, we have the solutions, it is in our DNA. But in order for us to demonstrate leadership, in order for us to survive climate change, and to ensure that these species, the relatives that we have relied on for thousands of years, do not go extinct, we need to address the industrial projects that are responsible for the devastation. My ancestors lived along Tiskwat for thousands of generations. The river still runs in my DNA, but I don't even know what it's supposed to look like. I've never seen the rapids, the smokehouses, the trap lines, the milky waters of the herring spawn at the mouth of the river. These are all stories that I grew up with. They're memories that are passed from generation to generation. And as a child, I used to imagine what it would feel like to live at our ancestral village site that we were violently removed from 4 generations ago. 100 years ago, the Catalyst pulp mill and hydroelectric dam was built over Tiskwat. Our village was destroyed, and our people were forcibly relocated to make room for industrial forestry. Our trees were stolen from our land, which we were prevented from accessing. And we were stolen from our waterways to make room for the processing of these trees. Now we are being encouraged to forget about our birthright, forget about our belonging, forget our ancestral memories, forget the river ever existed, and accept that the dam is an eternal structure, more deeply rooted in our territories than us. Accept that the extraction of every natural resource on our territories is inevitable. Accept that our lands must be a sacrifice zone for colonialism and capitalism. But as youth standing here, we do not accept what is unacceptable. We do not accept assimilation. We do not accept genocide. And we do not accept the industrial devastation of our lands to create profit for those who have never even walked upon them, who can't even pronounce the names of our territories, but insist ownership over them. The Catalyst mill and hydroelectric dam is on the market. It is being bid over by industries looking to buy a river that we never sold. This is an international issue because Tiskwat was once the second largest salmon-bearing river on the West Coast. And we can quantify that through science, but we can also measure that through our memories, which are a testament to our belonging. They stretch back thousands of years, and our ancestors tell us that it was once so abundant that you could walk on the backs of salmon. And we know that to be true. At the mouth of the river was once one of the largest herring spawn locations on the entire coast. 100 years ago, an industry killed off those herring, they killed off the salmon, and now that industry has collapsed. They forced us away from our sustenance to make room for extractive economies that forced us to then rely on colonial food systems. And now they have collapsed. Now they have no money, and now they are looking for another industry to replace this industrial project. But what about our future generations? That dam will come down eventually. It is just a question of if it comes down when we still have time to revive our salmon populations, when we have time to restore our river, or when the salmon are extinct. These are the choices that we're faced with as a generation, and we must be the ones to lead the way because it is our responsibility. So I want to thank our youth for standing alongside me, for coming all this way. You know, our lands are on the negotiating table within the United Nations, and our voices are not heard. But the real reason why I came here was to say what I'm saying today about Tiskwat, about our river, because that is what is mine. That is what belongs to my nieces and my nephews and my little cousins and the future generations beyond me. And I've been so grateful to connect with Indigenous peoples globally who recognize that hydroelectric dams are stealing from our birthright, are not the solution. And I'm grateful to speak these words and to speak our language into these international spaces. If we are not doing everything in our power and in this generation to restore Tiskwat, then we are accepting the extinction of wild salmon in our territories. And I want to make that incredibly clear. I would like to pass the mic to Vienna Timothy, my cousin, to read a statement from our youth.
Hello, I'm Vienna Timothy, and I'm from Musqueam Nation and Sliman Nation, and this is my statement. Indigenous people all over the world are facing problems with extractive industries destroying native land. I'm here to address the issues Indigenous people are facing with logging companies, types of industrial forest practices, the fish farms that affect our Indigenous fish, mining companies that destroy our land, the oil pipelines built on our territory, and the liquid natural gas that poisons our water, that bleeds into the aquifers which produce our water, and we all rely on that. The young ones in our territory were amazed by the fact Tiskwat was one of the biggest salmon runs on the coast. Our youth will never get to experience that, what it's like to have a river, unless we call out these industries and our dam project. They cut us off from our resources. Our people know how to live in harmony with our land, water, and trees. These industries don't. If we don't take away fish farms, there will be no fish to eat from because it will be filled with parasites. The waste under the fish farms will contaminate our ocean. If we don't remove the mills and refineries that produce chemicals, we will keep getting sick. We need to stop colonial forces from treating our lands as a resource, or our future generations won't be able to hide from the consequences caused by industries. The resource extraction we face is rooted in capitalism and colonialism. I'm a part of the generation that has not got to experience Tiskwat's beauty. We would not be here without our salmon. Our people have relied upon the arteries of our territories to sustain the life cycle of the salmon and form a basis of our existence. We will share the statement that has attached signatures of our youth from Tla'amin territory explaining why we need the dam removed and to restore the salmon. The statement is called Revive Our River.
Hello. Asats mamatlanan, Dechalats kaimachnan, Heoktisho samats tawa, Het Kwastenayats man, Het Katrin Harry at Tan, Het Mabel Mary Francis at Chichia, Het Ernest George Harry at Kukpa. Hello. My English name is Ace Harry. My ancestral name is T'Challa. I'm the daughter of Kwastenaya and Katrin Harry. My grandmother is Mabel Mary Francis. My grandfather is Ernest George Harry. I come from Tishosum, which is the Tla'amin reservation. My ancestry is Hamalko, which is a sister nation, and we originated in the Butte Inlet area. But my family was displaced, and I grew up on Tla'amin lands. This is my first time attending a UN space. I came to witness how Indigenous people are referred to in these meetings. I came to witness how Indigenous voices are responded to. And I came with the hopes that I would bring something productive back to my community. I have come to learn that Indigenous voices are not upheld here. I have learned that we are only encouraged to speak if we bring convenient messages, and that is because these spaces are dominated by entities that still rely on the exploitation of my land. I have learned that this forum is not a place for Indigenous peoples to create prosperity. It's a place for colonialism to consolidate its power for the final decades we have left in our lands. I have learned that the only people who will save our land are the people who have been there for thousands of years. In interactions with different forms of media, I've been accused of sounding hopeless because of the way I speak about colonial devastation and the way I speak about inaction on the part of colonial corporations and governments, because of my anger about the unnecessary suffering of my people. The truth is, I feel so much hope, and it's because of the delegation that I came here with. It's because of the Indigenous youth delegations my delegation has been able to connect with over the past 2 weeks. It's because of the time we've spent in Ganawage, in the Longhouse, with their survival school, with their river, witnessing how they have youth that have their language as a first language. When we build relationships with other communities, we understand how we fight the same forces. Colonialism threatens all our futures. When we fight to keep our lands livable, we are also fighting for those bought into colonialism. We fight for those who continue to enact its violence. As an Indigenous youth, we are familiar with having white people ask us what we need in order to assimilate. We are asked our opinion on how to get more Indigenous youth involved in leadership. And no one wants to hear that Indigenous people have been leading for hundreds of years. We've continued to lead, and it will never look like assimilation. Colonialism doesn't want to talk about the fact that our Indian reservations were put in place as a direct result of the biological warfare that wiped out over 99.9% of our people. How that's the only reason we have to sit at your table and you don't have to come to ours. Colonialism doesn't want to talk about how the Indian Act is set up to pit our people against each other and make decision-making an impossible process. How poverty is imposed upon us and then money is thrown so we can all fight over it. Colonialism doesn't want to name these things because when our people are free to gather and free to practice our ways of life, we're so much harder to steal from. When we speak our language, we understand how many thousands of years of connection we have to our territory because our language is an instruction manual for how to be taken care of by the land. I came here to name colonialism as something unsalvageable. as something that will always fight to take what is not theirs. I came here to name the fact that our people have never been disconnected from our land. We've only been displaced, and given how many thousands of years our people have existed on those lands, it's a very brief amount of time that we've been removed. The land is inevitable. The dam will not be there forever. The question is whether we want to return to our river before or after our wild salmon go extinct. I'm now going to read a letter that myself and other Tla'amin, Humalco, Klahus, and Comox youth wrote that has been gathering signatures from our youth. It's entitled Revive Our River. The subtitle is A Collective Call by Tla'amin, Klahus, Humalco, and Comox youth to reclaim and restore the ancestral river of Tiskwat. As Tla'amin, Klahus, Humalco, and Comox youth, we understand that we would not be here without the salmon. From headwaters to saltwater, our people have eternally relied upon the arteries of our territories to sustain the life cycle of the salmon and form the basis of our existence. Tiskwat is a major artery of Tla'amin territory. As a place of gathering and economy, it remains to be one of the most integral relationships to our nations. For thousands of generations, we have been fed by Tiskwat. Tiskwat, our inheritance, was stolen from us 4 generations ago by extractive industries, the colonial occupation of Powell River, newly established British Columbia, and the federal government of Canada. Over the course of 100 years, an industry moved in, destroyed the river, and then collapsed with the recent closure of Catalyst Mill. Now, we are confronted with another wave of industry seeking to buy the river that we never sold. As youth of this land, we stand upon the ancient and inherited responsibilities of our peoples to protect our lands and feed our future generations. With these responsibilities, we commit to the reclamation of Tiskwat, to return our people to the river. The pulp mill has been a major catalyst for the colonization of Tla'amin territories. The damming of our river and the devastation of our village site happened less than 100 years ago, and the mill is already dead. With global conditions and climate change, we know that the economic benefit of whatever industry comes next will not be great enough to offset the damage done to our territory and our people. Since extractive industries first began encroaching on and displacing our communities, we have been forced to depend on colonial food systems that are unhealthy, unreliable, and insufficient. We have the opportunity to reckon with the damage caused by the mill before the next industry crashes and before our salmon disappear. The world's largest dam removal project will soon begin on the Klamath River. It sets a monumental precedent for Indigenous nations in Washington, Oregon, and California, who are leading dam removal movements to restore rivers and bring back the salmon. Nations like the Lummi, Nooksack, Yurok, Lower Elwha Klallam Tribe, Yakima, Warm Springs, Maka, Swinomish, Tulalip, and more. We are not alone in our call for restoration. As youth, our elders tell us that Tiskwat was once one of the largest salmon-bearing rivers on the entire West Coast. They pass on that memory from their elders and their elders before them. Our memory is a testament to our belonging. For our generation to grow up without the river that sustained our ancestors since time immemorial is an injustice. We commit to ensuring that we are the last generation of our people to be separated from our river. Our future generations deserve to be fed, and unless we are willing to sacrifice our territory, colonial governments will never be dependable. The dam cannot and will not be there forever. Regardless of what is put on the table, we want our river back. Imut, thank you.
We have a little bit of time to accept a few questions.
Hi, thank you for your message. I am Juan Mayorga for several Mexican outlets. I'm here with the Earth Journalism Network. While I was hearing you, I tend to remember many of the claims of Mexican indigenous nations back there, which happen to have exactly the same diagnosis. I mean, it's capitalism, colonialism, racism, patriarchy, and so on. The main thing is that they might not be represented because, as you said, there's this inevitable barrier of the language and also like other kinds of gaps. But as hearing this as a kind of universal message across colonized populations, what would be your message to all of them in order to to let them know that they are not alone and that to trigger hope? Because as devastating as this diagnosis can be, there is also a need for something that pushes you on.
From north to south, Indigenous people are facing the same violence rooted in extractive capitalism and colonialism. And I think that international solidarity that transcends borders is incredibly important to develop an understanding of what it is we're really up against, because our territories are designated as sacrifice zones for global economies that we know do not profit our people or benefit our people, but rather steal from our birthright and direct resources to a very small percent of the world population. I have spoken with Indigenous youth from the global South who face the same industrial projects in their territories around hydroelectric dams, around deforestation, around the contamination of our waterways from mining and more. And I think that it's really important to step forward with united collective messages around our power and around our sovereignty. And we stand here, to represent messages that come from our grandparents. And I think that that is the most direct example of sovereignty that I can provide as a Tla'amin person. And I really respect the struggle and the resistance of Indigenous people, in Mexico, in other parts of the world who are facing the same battles.
Hello, my name is Elena Cox. I'm from Membertou First Nation in Nova Scotia. And I just had a question. You mentioned that you were collecting youth signatures in your area. Have you thought, or is it already ongoing, that you're collecting signatures from other Indigenous youth or colonizer supporters?
Okay. We have been speaking with our community members and our youth first and foremost, because we understand that any type of movement that emerges from our territory has to come from our peoples. For our people, being displaced 100 years ago from our ancestral village site, and as I was mentioning, made to forget this river that we have lived alongside for thousands of years. The idea of removing the dam, the idea of challenging the industrial occupation of our territories, it's, I don't want to say a new thing because our people have always fought colonialism, but I do think that we are very much in the early stages of our work as young people to challenge this dam as it was put on the market a few months ago. And I think that was a galvanizing point for our young people to connect with each other and determine, do we want another industry moving into our territories, or do we want to challenge the existence of this dam after 100 years? So I would like to have a conversation after this panel, and I think that doing more concrete work around solidarity with other Indigenous nations and Indigenous youth would be really powerful.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. So the situation with the mill closing is current to the point where this live stream is potentially the first time that a lot of people back home are listening to us youth speak about it. And I think something that colonialism has done to our communities is it's imposed this struggle of finding your role in community that, you know, didn't exist for us when we were based in our communities full time 100% of the time and we lived together the way that we used to. And so these days, it's such a learning process for our youth to figure out how to best provide for our communities and what our place is. And so coming to the UN, discovering pathways or exploring pathways that have been put forward to us as youth as being effective, I think was really important for me personally. And I think I can say probably for the rest of my delegation as well. In discovering what our roles really are for community, how we can actually show up for community. And so this is the beginning of an ongoing conversation that we're going to be having within community and repairing those relationships that have been decimated by residential schools and by politics and these things that, you know, these cycles that have been imposed upon us that continue to disrupt our relationships with each other and our ability to work together. This dam removal projects in general, removing extractive industries from Indigenous territories in general, is synonymous with fixing relationships that have been damaged by colonialism and community. And so we're at the beginning of that. And I think the scale of what will come and what we intend to bring up in our communities is pretty hard to overestimate. And so my priority right now is preparing for figuring out my role in community for the first time in my life as a youth. And I just think that that's, you know, the scale of that is going to be really hard to predict. But, you know, moving forward, and especially spending time in Ganawage, like it's been really, really amazing discovering what inter-community connection can look like. But I definitely don't feel ready to jump into those conversations quite yet when I haven't even fully and like truly connected with my community about what we're doing here.
All right, I think we need to pass over the space, but I want to raise my hands to all of you for witnessing our words. As Ace mentioned, you know, this international space has been really helpful for us as young people to be able to challenge work in our territories that gets overlooked. That, you know, that our people have been fighting in visible and non-visible ways for the past 100 years, and to articulate this and to name Tiskwat, you know, a memory that colonialism would rather us forget. There is a power in that, and I thank you all for being here as witnesses. Cheche Atanapich.